establish the why we're all here today. And I think a lot of that has to stem from the belief that this is probably one of the most opportunistic times in real estate history. There's so much going on. Obviously, we're all feeling the shift, and we can look at that as a challenge, or we can look at it as an opportunity. And I believe that those who are here see this as an opportunity to advance their business, to gain more market share. And so we're going to talk exactly, some strategies that you can implement to do that. And this 12-week course that we've put together is really for you. It's for your business and your goals. And we're so excited to have a rock star leading this session today. And this is about remargining your business. Peter Morkel has been in the industry for, is it 18 years, Peter? Crossing that mark. He's been in the business for a long time. He survived the last massive shift in 2008 and has so much skill set and knowledge that's been built up over that time. And he's going to be talking about remargining your business, expense management, which is such a key to not just surviving, but also thriving through a shifting market. His business did over 50 million in volume the last 12 months. So he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. We're so excited to have him today. And I'm going to pass the time over to Peter.
Yeah. I hope our technology cooperates. Can everyone hear me? Are there people on Zoom or no? No. Okay, great. So this is not a very enthralling topic, numbers, expense management, right? None of us like to talk about the dreaded B word, right? Budget. But I want to engage with this topic a little differently today, because I think, like my grandma used to say, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? And I think that that's true in our personal lives, and it's true in our businesses as well. And so in this 12-week series, remargining your business is placed second. And I think that's intentional, because until you take a hard look at the numbers, it's hard to know, am I profitable, am I not? You know, some of us, especially when I was a solo agent, relatively new, my income did the hill and valley thing. Who's had that experience, the hill and valley experience in real estate? Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that and how to ameliorate that a little bit, particularly going into a shifting market. These are some of the topics we're going to discuss today. Our perspective on expense management, measuring the market, like when do you know to start making cuts, that kind of thing. How to size your business, how to cut the fat, and making the most of what you do have, and then kind of coming up with an action plan. So I think it's really important that as I prattle on today, you interrupt me with questions or for clarifications. And finally, that you leave away with a couple of action steps, because unless you implement what we discuss or what you learn, it's not going to do you any good. And I think whenever I sit in a class, if I'm there as a prisoner, you know, we've talked about that model, because I feel like I've just got to kill time and I have to be in that class because it's CE and I'm renewing in 2 weeks. Or as a true explorer, the other end of the spectrum where I'm curious and really looking to engage with the content, the outcome's far different. So hopefully you can put on your explorer hat and engage with the content today. So Gary Keller says, unless it's nailed down, it goes. So when markets shift, your margin becomes your biggest issue. Who could define a margin? What is your margin? Who knows what your margin is? Income minus expenses. So that's kind of like what your profit is. So if I'm making widgets and it costs me $8 to make a widget, and I sell them for $10, I've got a $2 margin, a 20% margin. Okay. So if any of you are familiar with the budget model, what is the goal? Becca Summers, I'm looking at you. What is your margin in real estate? What should your margin be?
It should be 33%.
33%. Okay. So what happens to all the other money you make? The taxes, what else?
Taxes and marketing and admin and salary and staff and yeah.
Okay. And so obviously, if you're a solo agent that's been doing this 2 years, compared to someone who's running a team, your business budget is going to look very different. So we'll address that today as well. So remargining means that we're going to protect our margin to save our business and essentially cut expenses. So this is something that's important to realize. Everyone is affected by a shift, whether you have a big business or a small business, whether you've been in the business a long time or a short time, but it's the people who act quickly and efficiently and remargin fast that are able to thrive in a down market. Because if you're able to take action relatively quickly, you can position yourself to take market share during a declining market. So we're going to talk about these: measuring the market, sizing your business, and cutting the fat. So how to know when to take action. On the right are 6 metrics for when the market is actually shifting. So does someone want to read those off for me? 1 through 6. In your loudest voice.
More inventory, increased days on market, fewer pendings, smaller board, lower production, handle volume, and fewer leads.
Okay. So I quickly had a look this morning. Josh helped me with this. Inventory in January was just around 2,000 listings on the market. As of today, it's 8,700. So do we have more inventory? Okay. Days on market has not increased substantially. It's actually quite similar. Does that seem right to you guys? No, it doesn't, does it? But if you actually look at the numbers, in February it was 6. Today it's like 9 or 10, depending on whether you look at the average or the median. Does that seem right? So what do you think's going on with those numbers if you pull them off the MLS? I think you're right. I think it's tracking the closings, that's not talking about pending. So I think when we look at those same numbers a month or 2 from now, those days on market will get longer. So fewer pendings. So this is kind of an interesting number. This is just a market snapshot that I pulled on the MLS. Under contracts, under contract and backup, a year ago versus today is down 21.6%, that number in red on the right there. So that number over there. So your pendings have gone down. So fewer pendings, a smaller board. So I don't know why this is listed where it is, because I think this is a lagging measure. I think the size of our board shrinks, the number of realtors in our community shrinks, but I think that's a lagging measure. I don't think it happens right away. Unless you're very part-time and you only do 3 or 4 deals a year and the cost of renewing your license just doesn't make sense. Perhaps in that regard, you might, that first year in a shift, not renew your license. I'm aware of some folks like that who do 3 or 4 transactions a year, and the $1,000 in board dues, they're just like, I'm going to move to a referral brokerage where I don't have to be a member of the board, or I'm going to put my license on inactive. So have you guys encountered that? Have you seen people talking about maybe putting their license on inactive? Yeah, so I think that's beginning to happen. I don't think it's quite happening yet. Lower production and or volume. Oh. So in June of 2021, there were just right around 5,000 closings. And in June of 2022, there were 4,007. So that's 1,000 less, which is 20% less production, June over June. And then fewer leads. Fewer leads is kind of hard to gauge. I would use maybe, if you're doing online leads, you might notice a decline. But the way I've noticed it is open house traffic. Like I posted on Wasatch Front Agents and I think our internal Facebook page, I think we've seen a massive decline in open house activity, particularly anything over the median. Have you guys noticed that as well? So are we in a shift? Absolutely. So then what do we do with that information? So here's an activity that I'd like us all to engage in. I handed you guys a personal budget worksheet. That's for later. I want you to flip that over, and on the back of the page, I want you, because this is individual, right? I want you to track your income for the next 60 days. I want you to write how many closings you've got coming up in the next 60 days. You know, they say don't count your chickens before they hatch in real estate. I want you to kind of count your chickens before they hatch. So I just want you to look at your pendings. How many closings do I have coming up in the next 2 months? So between now and 2 months from now. And how much dollars, like what does that translate to in dollars? So like on our team, what do we have pending, Josh? Where is he? Is he here? How many pendings do we have right now? 16 pendings. So let's assume that the income to the team for each of those is what, half of 10,000, $5,000. So that means our income is 80K for the next 2 months. So it's 40K a month. Now we know kind of a ballpark idea of what our income is going to be as a team for the next 60 days. Why do you think we just do 60 days right now? Why don't we try and project further out?
Because it's a consistent shift.
Okay. Yeah, the shift happens kind of in stages. Why else?
Like red light, green light, like just being able to see like what can we afford to do right now versus like you can't forever what's happening.
Yeah, so you're playing red light, green light with your expenditure. So if you have 2 tight months and then 2 good months, maybe you can do that event you were planning, or an augmented version of it or something like that. Is the shift, because the shift happens in real time, we need to adjust in real time. The other thing is, I think as we project out past 2 months, our projections become more nebulous. They're not quite as accurate. So if every listing is closing every time, you can project out and assume, okay, in 3, 4, 5 months. But if the number of listings sitting goes longer, or you have buyers that are canceling, projecting out more than 2 months becomes kind of like a guessing game. It's not quite as accurate. So I think 60 days is about as accurate as you can get.
Peter, so sorry. If anyone else is missing that budget sheet, will you just raise your hand? Passing out a couple extras.
Is
Okay,
anyone
great.
willing to feel vulnerable and share kind of what their projections are for the next 60 days? Oops, I think something that happens when you put that number on paper is one of 2 things happens. You're like, oh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Or, oh crap, really? Like one of those 2 things happens on the inside. I want you to take that energy of like, oh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was, but I'm going to be practical and apply these principles. Or, oh crap, it's worse than I expected. Don't revel in that oh crapness. This is an opportunity to lever out of that and put together a meaningful plan that can get you back into productivity, that can allow you to have just a realistic perspective on what the market's doing and what you can do to take market share. So we know how many in your pipeline, what the projected income is, and what your average monthly income will be. Okay, so we've done this activity. So it's time to take a cold, hard look at your financial situation. Who here uses, by a show of hands, a profit and loss to manage their business? Okay, raise them high. A profit and loss. Okay. Okay, who doesn't use a profit and loss? Okay. So I did not use a profit and loss for many years. And coming to KW encouraged me. I ran a very successful niche brokerage called Home Team Realty for a number of years, but I didn't know my numbers. And if you don't know your numbers, you don't know how to react to the changing market, right? And one of the biggest gifts in coming here and learning the budget model, learning the economic model, is knowing exactly what my numbers are and being able to engage with that content in a very, very powerful way. Because if you don't know your numbers, you don't know what to do. So if you don't have a profit and loss, I'd encourage you to create one, okay? And I'm gonna give you some guidelines for what that might wanna look like. And that's what we call the budget model. So I'm actually gonna go there now. So when you are trying to do a business budget. So we're going to do business and then we're going to do personal. Your business budget, these numbers aren't very clear, but they show you kind of the categories of expenditure that you as a realtor engage with. So what are the two big ones as a realtor that are on your business budget? Salaries and lead generation. So at different points in production, those percentages adjust. So when you are a solo agent, who's doing all the lead generating? Who's doing the transaction coordinating? Who's doing you're doing it all. So your salaries can be kind of low. Maybe you've got a transaction coordinator that you pay per file. That might be some good leverage. So salaries can be quite low. But you're spending a lot of money on generating new business. Maybe that's print ads. Maybe that's mailers. Maybe that's those evil people that begin with a Z, those leads, you know? So, and let's talk about that. What are what are you spending money on right now to generate leads? Tell me, guys. What do you Zillow, Boomtown, Facebook, okay. Events.
Yeah, a lot of investing in the database.
Investing in the database. Postcards. Who are those postcards going to? You doing like a geographic farm or to your database? Okay. So if you're going to hold your lead generation dollars accountable, you need to look at your ROI, your return on investment. So a few years ago, when they first started talking about a shift is coming, I looked at my business, and I'm going to say this, and all of you are going to kind of be like, what the heck were you thinking? I was spending upwards of $4,000 a month on Zillow leads. Okay. That makes you uncomfortable. It made me kind of uncomfortable too, sorry, when I realized what my return on that was. It was not great. The first year of those leads, I got a decent return. The second year, it got worse. And then the third year, the return was awful. It was basically trading dollars for dollars. And so I canceled all Zillow spending. And you know what? My production went up. And the reason is because instead of chasing these Zillow leads, I spent more time and a little bit more money on my SOI, my database, and we generated more business from our database and saved all that money we're spending on Zillow leads. So I guess I'm kind of preaching at you a little bit. Don't spend money on Zillow leads. The ROI just isn't great. It's really not. I know of some really, really big teams that post big production numbers. When you actually look at their P&L, they're drowning. They're not holding their lead gen dollars accountable. So how about you guys? What do you think is worth spending money on versus not worth spending money on? If you had to really take a long, hard look at it. So I'm going to share something with you that Angie Fisher, how long have you been in the business, Angie? 7 years. 7 years. Angie said something to me a few years ago, and I was like, wow, that's profound. Right before we went into like a very strong seller's market, she said, I'm not spending any money on generating buyers. I'm only spending money on generating sellers. And I was like, that is really a good strategy, because if you get a listing, the odds of you getting a buyer off of that listing go way up, right? But if you land a buyer, the odds of them having a home to sell, you don't know. And often the online buyer leads are first-time buyers, they don't have a home to sell, that kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of profound. And I kind of adopted the same strategy. With the exception of advertising our open houses where we did land buyers, we quit running ads to generate buyers. That might shift a little as we go into more of a buyer's market, but I think that's a good strategy. Where are your closings coming from? Where else would you say your dollars are well spent in the lead gen category?
Thank you, gifts for referrals.
Okay, rewarding referrals. Okay, how have you guys rewarded your referrals in the past? A warm hug. And you know what? That's free 99. Yeah, that doesn't cost a thing. So a little awkward, but it doesn't cost a thing. What else, guys? We send crumble cookies. So when someone gives me a referral, I send crumble cookies. And maybe we look at that and we say, okay, we're not going to send a dozen crumble, we're just going to send 6. That would be a way to remargin that expense. Okay. Or handwritten note, gift card. What else? Are you rewarding that behavior? Yeah.
We were just talking, we do a $5 company card, they send us a lead, and when they close, we send them like a $50 to $75 Texas Roadhouse.
Okay.
Makes sense? Like, they
Yeah.
choose the name, and then when they turn into something, we get a better reward. So it's like, instead of them to send us groceries.
And what is there? You're leading with revenue. So you, yeah, so basically what Riley said is they get a small reward for giving you the name and number, for giving you the lead. And then when it closes, they get a big reward. So maybe it's a small gift card at the beginning and a big gift card when they close.
I think one of the KW books actually suggested you reward the person free more than rewarding themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. You reward the referee rather than the referral. Yeah. So if John McKinney calls me and says, hey, my coworker wants to sell their home or buy a home, I'm going to send John crumble cookies, and I'll often send it to his office, because guess what that does? Generates conversations. Where'd you get these crumble cookies? Oh, my realtor sent them. Well, my realtor didn't send me cookies, you know, so that's valuable. Gets conversations going. Okay, so lead gen should be what percentage of your budget? About 9.2, 9.3, somewhere around there. When you're remargining, something you could potentially do is talk to your vendors. So if you are working closely with a home warranty company or a title company, and they're all different rules, a lender, see if they are able to help split the cost of some of your events or provide food at an event, that kind of thing. So that's a way to reduce your cost potentially. Okay. And then salaries is supposed to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. What are we running? 12 to 20. We're at 15% on our team, and we're trying to cut that. So one of our activities today is we're going to do a live firing of my director of admission. I'm just kidding. So no, and I'm going to share this with you because I think it's important. And my team, the people matter more than anything else. And so I'm going to cut everywhere before I cut salaries, right? Before I cut people that have contributed to our team over an extended period. But I will say this, and we'll get to this in a second here. Where is it? I'll get to it in a second. If you're going to start cutting the fat, I think before you do that, have conversations with people. And I think if you sit down with your whole team and say, hey, we're going into a shift. This is what's happening. Tell me a little bit about your plans for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So I had this conversation with someone about 6 months ago, and their goals no longer aligned with what the team was going to be doing. So it became a very easy conversation to say, okay, well, I'm going to give you a 90-day period to transition to what you want to do. We'll continue to pay your salary. You'll continue to work for us. And at the end of the 90 days, that's the end of it, and we remain good friends. It was such an awesome conversation because I didn't feel like I was firing someone. I didn't feel like I was having a hard conversation. I felt like I was having a conversation with a friend and helping them transition to their goals, So I think that learning to have these conversations is an important part of this process. So remargining kind of sounds like it's all about money. It's all about business, but it is ultimately about people. You want to live through the recession, through the shift, and you want to provide opportunities for your people during the shift, during the recession, for them to continue to thrive. So this is something that's really important. keep one question uppermost in your mind. How did this expense help produce a buyer or a seller lead? So can someone shout out loud, tell me of something you're spending money on that you know for sure does not generate leads for you? What? Swig daily, okay. Car washes, yes, thank you, Josh. So, okay, here's something we did. We went through, printed up, 2 months worth of our credit card statement, our business credit card statement. And Josh sat out on the deck and went and highlighted blue, yellow, and red, right? Blue is we're gonna have to keep this. Yellow, we're gonna keep a watch on it. Yes. Yeah, he's like, and I discovered that I have both Supersonic and Quick Quack that I'm paying for every month. So I can get a car wash anywhere, anytime. That does not help me generate leads. A clean car is not that essential. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. So Kim, what has been our tradition on our team with lunch?
Josh has a variety thing on his phone. We all have
Adrian Don.
Every week.
And one person who I won't name, who's brand new on the team, and he chose to come over, I said, then Peter said, okay, well, we can go 2 miles this time, but that means we won't be able to run Carlos for a few more.
Yeah, so we've been a little like spendy when it comes to team lunches. Part of that is we have a really good culture on our team and we want it to be fun, but we are looking at cutting team lunches. Yeah, exactly. Keeping it a little more budget friendly. So if it produces a buyer or a seller, it's worth keeping. If you say, I don't know, and it doesn't, it may need to be cut. Zero-based budgeting. So I attended a panel discussion with a realtor out of Portland named Zarita Dow. About 4 years ago. She's great. And she was about 10 million, 20 million ahead of me in production at the time. So when you go to these big conventions like Family Reunion, and you see these people selling 500 homes a year or 1,000 homes a year, and you're selling 40, you can't relate, right? But Sarita was selling 75. And I was like, oh, the thing she's talking about, I can grasp. And then she sold 100 the next year. I was like, oh, I can do that. If she, Sarita did this. She would just cancel her credit card. She would just call a credit card company and say, hey, can you shut down my credit card so no more expenses go through? And you know what would happen? She'd start getting calls from vendors. Being like, hey, your payment didn't go through. Oh, really? Remind me what you do for me. Like, what exactly is this expense that I'm paying for every month? And that's kind of what she did. So it's not quite the same thing as zero-based budgeting, but that was her strategy. So if you're just at a complete loss for, man, where do I even begin? Then I say, shut off your credit card that you put all your business expenditures on and see who calls you. Because if they start calling you, you can then engage in a conversation. So something we did, we used Chime as our CRM and they do some lead gen for us. And we were spending a certain dollar amount per month. We called them up because we were thinking of canceling entirely. And our real estate coach said, well, call them up, see if they'll renegotiate. And we shaved off, what did we shave off, Josh? $1,000 a month?
Since we started?
With Chime.
Oh, with Chime, yeah. We went from 16 to
600, yeah. So we saved off $1,000 a month. They didn't change anything. They still provide us the exact same service. So yeah. Once again, when you're engaging with vendors, I called someone who provides a service to me. And I said, hey, because we're friends, I wanted to call you before I sent the email that unfortunately, I don't think I can use your services anymore. We're remargining our business. We're trying really to be cost conscious. And because you're important to me, I wanted you to hear it from me rather than just getting an email. This person messaged back and she said, wow, you're such a class act. I'm really grateful that you did it the way you did. Let's talk, you know? And so I'm not going to have to continue with that expense. But guess what? If in a year or 2 years, I want to re-engage, have I burned any bridges? No, I've maintained that relationship and they're going to be more than willing to continue to do business with me in the future. So I think that how you have these dialogues is important. Here's some things where you can cut the fat: snail mail, office space, vendor contracts, print advertising, and office supplies. Okay. So I want you all to take a pause, look at your production that you have on the back of that page. And I want you to think, what am I spending money on that I can absolutely cut out of my business budget? What could I absolutely cut today and not really feel the pain of it? I want you to write that down. Who knows where the term cut the fat comes from? I don't either. So, yeah, pork spending. Yeah. So I think it's significant though that it says cut the fat, but it doesn't say anything about cutting muscle or cutting bone. Because for an entity, an animal or a person, to be fully, you know, energetic and functional, you need your muscle, you need your bone, you don't need the fat, right? So, said the skinniest man in the room. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So your organization, you need to have an organizational model. And in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, there is an org model for different levels of production. So one of the mistakes I made in my business very early on is I was all excited about growing and I started adding buyer's agents to my team before I had the administrative structure to support those buyer's agents. What do you think happened? They didn't get the value that they needed. So they stuck around and I worked twice as hard trying to keep them and trying to keep them happy. And even though we left on good terms, some of those folks now look back and they're like, oh yeah, your team's so much better than it was when I was there. Because we're that good of friends, like I can take that feedback, right? So I think that's important, is don't let your budget outstrip your organization model, but follow the model. Because if you don't follow the model, you're going to end up incurring costs, both in time and money, that are going to be significant, that might damage the bone. Brad Morgan's a really good example of running a very lean, very targeted operation that is not admin heavy in any way, right? You and Joel and one admin, right, has typically been the model. At one transaction coordinator, that's it. And what was your production last year? Do you mind me asking? Right around 100 million. Okay. So if Brad can do it, so can you. So yeah, it's really important to make sure that we're using our people and our resources well. Okay. So the two big ones are payroll and lead gen. So I had to fire my mom, and this was so hard. And I'm just kidding, I didn't fire my mom. My mom, her role on our team, she was a transaction coordinator. And then as the team grew, we shifted her to listing management. So she became our listing manager, meaning when we took a listing, she orders the photos, she talks to the stager, she arranges for the cleaning. What else? Home warranty, orders the listing warranty. Well, that was kind of her thing. Once it goes under contract, then we hand it off to a transaction coordinator. But on the front end, she was doing, and then she did concierge on the back end. Once it had closed, put them on mailing campaigns, and they get a gift every 90 days. that would come in the mail. So she was responsible for before and after. And then during it was the under contract phase. But my mom is 70 and she wants to retire. And I think in some respects, she's been on my team just because it's an opportunity for us to hang out, right? And so when I chatted to her, she's like, well, da, da, da. So she really wants to retire. So as part of remargining my business, Granny's going into retirement in September, and that's perfect for her and it's perfect for me. It doesn't mean I have to fire her. I had an opportunity to have a conversation, which goes back to my discussion earlier, is talk to your team. What are their goals? What are their hopes? So basically, and it won't be awkward at Thanksgiving.
So you're not replacing.
I'm not replacing that position. Yeah. So basically what we're doing is we're giving those duties to someone else on the team, and essentially what we call here combining positions. Okay. Which once again goes back to a whole other set of discussions on hiring well, hiring the right people, hiring talent that can continue to take a load, and making sure that you compensate them effectively. So that's kind of this idea of, if you listen to what your staff wants, sometimes they'll self-select out of your organization, and the timing is perfect for them and for you. Okay, and we've talked about scripting and hard conversations. What about borderline performers? What does that mean? Who runs a large organization? Shoni, how would you classify a borderline performer?
Well, I think that what's super important is planning for the market that you're heading into, and you have to have people who are agile, who can adapt, and like you said, take on more than they previously were. In the shifting market, there has to be more done by the talent that you have on the team. So those are individuals who gladly accept that heightened responsibility and are willing to do more with the time.
So I'll give you an example. For years, I've wanted to hire an ISA, have an ISA on the team, someone who fields the incoming calls, assign calls, the internet leads, turns them into appointments, and then hands them off to my team members. It's a very difficult position to hire for. You have to interview a lot of candidates. It's a very specific behavioral profile, and I've sucked at it. I've just not been able to hire the right person to do that. This is not the time for me to be engaging in that activity. Instead, it's better for Kim and Jason and those people on my team to continue to do lead conversion at a high level themselves as agents on the team. Because A, they're really good at it, they've been doing it a long time, and B, we don't want the added expense. We want to increase their bottom line and our bottom line without adding cost. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, so just on this, part of this is collaboration. Last brokerage I had, the downturn, shut it off the space and everything like that. And so I think within your office space is the same thing. Like having that infrastructure, you still need that support, then ISA, and someone else has one that's really good. It's possible to get some time for $1,000 a month, cost. So as the market shifts down, there's necessities that you need to have that shut it down. Sometimes it's not getting rid of it all together and just hunting on it. You might be able to brainstorm a few in your office and figure out how you can take 3 or 4 people and be allowed.
Yeah. Something that we've done is we hired a marketing intern. So we really needed help. We hired an intern part-time, and that was a far better hire than trying to hire someone full-time to do the same job. So we could pay her less than we would pay a full-time person. And she probably won't be with us long-term. And if she is, it'll probably be more of a virtual role. And so she's incredible at what she does, that kind of thing. But her life dreams are not tied to how we perform as a team. So So I want to have a conversation about what the difference is between prospecting and marketing. Prospecting, you spend a lot of time doing, but not a lot of money. Marketing, you spend more money and less time. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Prospecting, you focus on, and this it calls it your network, people you already know. It shocked me to sit down 2 weeks ago and make a list of everyone I've met in the last month and a half or 2 months that is not in my database. I've not added them. These are people I've met through kids' school things or through when we moved to our new neighborhood, and I've never bothered to add them to my database. They're not getting my monthly email or mailer. We're not having regular conversations. To sit down and add those people was huge, because for every 12 people you have in your database that are consistently communicated with over a period of time, what's the metric? 2 deals. For every 12 people in your database in a 12-month period, you'll probably get 1 repeat or referral and 1 direct piece of business if they're properly marketed to and properly, engaged with. That's a huge deal, particularly in a shifting market. Okay. Marketing is still something you could do in a shifting market and probably should do, but you need to make sure that your dollars are held accountable and that you make offers for immediate response. Have you guys heard this expression, MOFers? It's not a time to be engaging in personal branding where you're like, oh, look at me, I'm the world's best realtor, and where you're touting yourself. Essentially, what you ought to be doing in your marketing pieces is making an offer for response. So a simple example, very common, is, would you like to know what your home is worth in this market? CMA. So if you're interested, text your address to this number or text CMA to this number, and one of our team members will reach out to you. So whether it's online or a postcard or whatever, you need to make offers for immediate response. Can anyone else think of another offer for immediate response you might make in a shifting market?
Sell your house for the next 90 days, or I'll buy it myself.
Okay. Yeah.
I think what the value would be, an easy one is reaching out to people around the country. Something along the lines of, do you feel like your taxes impact your free market analysis? That would be a massive response. It doesn't cost. And if you can actually, that's a really easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Fight the Board of Adjustment. Yeah. So when would you mail that letter out? October, I think. September, October. Yeah. When you get your tax notice, if it seems crazy high, call me. I can help you learn how to fight your taxes. Yeah.
The number one conversation that I'm having with buyers right now is talking about 2-1 buy downs.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, that's seriously, most people don't know what that is, and they don't realize that they could get into it for a much lower interest rate and then refinance in a couple of years.
So you could do something that says, let me show you how to get into a home for $500 less than on a 30-year fixed mortgage. Something like that, some kind of offer like that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so what not to cut? So customer service. This is not the time to quit using a professional photographer on your listings and start using your iPhone. Okay. It's kind of my pet peeve. If you're getting paid 2, 3, 4% to list a home, we're not going to talk commissions, but you should spring for some professional photography. You don't quit doing drone footage and Matterport on your luxury listings just because we're in a shift. That's where you should spend the money, because A, that's the right thing to do, and B, that's going to set you apart from realtors that do cut their quality of service during a shifting market. You good?
If your business is slowed down and you have a little time on your hands, and in the last, 6 or 8 years, you've never went to a photo shoot,
it's an easy opportunity to get in front of your clients and talk to them why they're there and explain why it's happening. So those are, as you're going through this, you may find chunks of time that are really good times to interact with your client, ask for referrals, do those sort of things.
I'm going to wrap it up here in a few minutes, but I want to make this final kind of plea. Get face-to-face and voice-to-voice with your existing and past clientele. Face-to-face and voice-to-voice. However you choose to do that. It's the highest level of communication. It'll put you back top of mind with them. And like Brad said, if you've got some downtime, if you're not crazy busy like you were 6 months ago, scrambling to the 3 listings that your client could buy and begging the listing agent to take your offer. If you've got some downtime, now's the time to get face-to-face and voice-to-voice with people. I promise you it'll produce dividends. And whether that's popping by for a photo shoot on their listing. And then one final thing, ask for referrals before, during, and after the transaction. This is Buffini 101. It is basic real estate stuff that most of us don't do consistently. But when you're in an appointment at a listing or at a buyer consultation, tell them, hey, during this process, I'm going to provide you with a high level of service. And I'm hoping that I produce such a great result for you that you wouldn't hesitate to tell your friends and family about me. Does that seem fair? Okay, that's a fair question, right? When you're at the closing table, hey, let's talk about how the process went. Here's some wins. Here's some problems we avoided. Did I meet your expectations? Awesome. Would you be willing to give me a 5-star review on Google or whatever? Hey, and more importantly than that, do you feel comfortable referring me to your friends and family because of the level of service I provided? Oh yeah, you did a great job. Awesome. I just wanted to let you know I'll be following up with you in the months ahead to make sure that everything's going well with your new home. And if you know anyone who needs my help, I'd love to be of service to them. So you never know where your next referral is going to come from. But if you ask, you're more likely to know. So, okay. So use human energy. There are some things you can do for free. Picking up the phone, getting face-to-face, that is free. I want you to flip over your page. And on the other side is your personal budget. So obviously how much you bring home matters. But I want you to look at your personal budget. And I want you to see what you're spending each month personally. So I'm going back to the very beginning here. Because you do not want to spend on lifestyle when you could be spending to preserve and grow your business. So let's pick up that worksheet and I want you to actually fill it out. What is most of our biggest expense typically? Housing. Yeah. Our mortgage, our rent. Yeah, that's usually our biggest expense. Write that on the form. What else? Cars, auto payments if you've got them. Yeah. So I'm going to open a can of worms. If you have car loans and credit card debt, is now the time to pay them off? Depends. Why? Who says yes? Any yeses in the room? Why? Okay. You know your income now, you don't know it 6 months from now. So you say, pay off all your debt, try and get it down. Okay. What else? Who says no, now's not the time? Shoni, Novali. Why?
I come from the perspective of looking at the interest rate. So the depends, I think, is really important. But I will always look at if my money can be invested elsewhere and make a higher return than that interest on the car loan or whatever the debt is, then I'm going to use that for an investment, which in these shifting markets, that cash is king. And so it is important to be able to prepare for some of those things that are going to be on discount.
Okay. So don't point that at me. Okay. So a scenario might be, I've got an auto loan at 2.5%, but I'm got cash sitting aside where I could pay that auto loan off, but instead maybe hold on to it and buy a discounted duplex in 6 months. Is that kind of what you're
Exactly. So
saying-
if you're going to get a 10% return on an investment deal or 15% return, well, that 2.5% savings is negated by the investment return that you would have received.
Okay.
So you're really getting a net 13% if you got a 15% ROI on the real estate deal.
Real estate deal. Okay. Novalee?
So two reasons. One is Shoney's. Well, first of all, I agree with it depends. One is Shoney's reason. The other is, what if next month, all of a sudden you have 0 closings and you can't make your mortgage payment because you paid off your car loan? And if you had that money in your savings account, you could have made it through that month, right?
Okay.
So that's why I say it depends. I mean, I always say you better have 6 months of your expenses in your bank account, and then you would never have to make that decision. And then you're in Shoney's boat, right? Where you could do the investment. So it depends is the answer.
She's our market center administrator. She's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I manage the books for the office, and I also have an accounting business. So
I would also say, last week we talked about session months. Why do we even want to know leads? Really, we should have 18 months. So whatever you have that. You don't have to make poor decisions.
Under the gun.
Yeah, so that's, we know what that's what the average session. Heading into a session, probably from a session, really should be flowing past 6 months and really that 12 or 18. That's some extra noise you can get rid of, like otherwise.
Peter, can you repeat what he said?
Yeah. So he basically said the average recession is 18 months. And so you should maybe have more than 6 months, 18 months worth of living expenses set aside so that you can weather a storm. And if that means selling something to get to that 18 months, maybe that's what you need to do. So I'm going to share with you what I did the last big recession and how not to do it. Because that's, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna add that there were 2 things that I've heard recently on getting ready for this.
One of the best things you can do to save money right now is to go into your computer and your phone and delete your credit card on autofill, because it's going to help challenge every single time you buy something. But that's one of the first things that you can do to help get control of your own personal finances. And the second one is look at everything that you spend and look at it on an annual basis, because maybe you might trade your car in for something different if you really looked at what the annual expense was instead of just on a monthly basis, what that is. So those were 2 that came off of, I think, Empire Builders.
Awesome. So I was in the process of flipping a home and I got a contract on it in December 2006. So December 2006, we made $35,000 on that flip and we thought we were special. So we closed on a brand new home. And then in January, I had no closings. So this is before I was at KW, before I had the kind of wisdom spoken into my life. It was just me winging it, you know. And I had no closings in February, but I had a listing in Springville, Northeast Springville, Jim and Mickey Hardesty's house. I'll never forget this. We listed it in February and no showings. And I'm like, what the heck? It's priced where the comps are. And then I was like, those mean realtors around me, they've lowered their prices. Those stinkers. So now we have to lower our price. We chased that market down for 6 months straight and they delisted their home and waited 5 more years to sell. So we never sold that home. I got a home equity line of credit and lived on that for 3 months because I didn't have a closing in January, February, March, or April of that year. But I quickly retooled and I'd done some short sales prior and I started to brand myself as doing short sales. And then I ended up doing about 120 short sales during the recession. Saved my bacon, right? But don't do it that way. This time will not be like that time. I don't think we'll see the return of the short sale. I don't think the bottom is falling out. I think we're going into a more normal market. I think we will see some potential price retracement from the last year or two. But ultimately, I think that this recession should not be super, super long. That's just my prediction. I think it'll be more moderate. But I do think we can do some things to be prepared. So one of the lessons I learned the last go around was I paid myself a salary. So when I had really good months, my salary stayed the same, kind of the Dave Ramsey Hill and Valley approach. And the money just went into my business account. And then I did another sale, money goes in my business account, and I paid myself a salary. And we lived on next to nothing for a number of years as that Hill and Valley account grew. And then I raised my salary after a year or two, and then raised my salary again. And so I think it's really important that if you're in a place now where you're having good months and bad months, and you're like, the IRS a little money, that kind of, start paying yourself a modest salary, cut your expenses, monitor your budget, and just start to do that, because there's no better time than the present, except maybe, a year ago. So please, if you're not doing it, I want to see you last. I want to see you survive this recession and take market share. And one of the best things you can do is cut personal expenses, cut lifestyle. We were planning a 3-week trip. We've decided to cancel it. We're going to go camping instead. So take that for what it's worth. Could I afford it? Probably. Am I going to afford it? No, my kids will have just much fun playing in the mud as they would traipsing around Europe. So anyway, any final questions, friends? Make use of the free resources that you have. If you're here at KW, use Command. Command has got some awesome ways to track. Where is it? I don't think I have an image of it, but you can use Command to track your production, your closings. I use Sisu on our team. We're probably going to shift to something else, but know your numbers and stick to a budget and look 60 days ahead. Okay. Any questions? Let's ask questions. Thoughts?
Question. So do you take any commission? Do you take any commission or just straight salary?
So I take a salary. So I take because for my taxes, right? I take a salary. I'll just tell you, I take $7,000 a month salary, and I take a $4,000 distribution every month, distribution of profits. And then twice a year, I'll look at how our business is doing and see if I can pay myself a bonus or not.
And when you close a transaction, then everything just goes into the team.
I don't.
And you take those as
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've considered not doing that and taking my split.
Is there anybody else too? I guess I'm wondering, as far as that split, when you see those numbers, are you taking any split? Or are you paying it all into the team for those numbers to work that way? I'd love your input. Riley.
Riley?
I have 2 questions.
So I do it very similarly, but I mostly pay myself a salary to offset my taxes at the end of the year. So I have my deduction set super high.
Yeah, me too.
We pay each other a salary, or from our business pay us a salary. And then we just do every 2 weeks, basically look at it as like an employee paycheck of what the distribution needs to be to meet our personal expenses, but nothing more, nothing less. So we're not trying to live off of like, if we have a $50,000 month, we have a $10,000 month, like it's the same, and everything else just goes into business reserves for a rainy day. My question, I actually asked Becca this. I pay around $300 a month for postcards. I brought them up earlier. I have no way of knowing whether I have a closing coming from one or a postcard until I get it. So how could I analyze that expense and see, is it worth it or not? Becca and I talked, the cost of the postcard seems reasonable for market price and so on and so forth, but that's an expense we've been mulling over for like a month now. Like, should we cut it and put that money into Facebook ads, something that's more direct lead related, or would it be worth keeping it in the event that, our farm pops off and we get a listing?
How long have you been doing it for?
6 months. Yeah, probably 6 months.
The kind of the theory is that geographic farms take 12 months to really start producing. What is that 300 as a % of your lead gen budget?
I'd have to look, but I think my total advertising budget for the year is like $13,000, and our GCI last year was 230. So it's not substantial.
So as a percentage, it's not huge.
Mhm.
So I would just look at, okay, what is my, to kind of talk about the principles, talk about next 60 days, what does our GCI look like? And if this is less than maybe 1% of our GCI, I think it's fine to keep spending that money.
Cool.
But I don't know, anyone disagree with that?
I would knock the doors.
Yeah, knock the doors, layer. So make sure you're doing something else, getting face-to-face, voice-to-voice with those people. Yeah.
You said you've already had closings off of it, right?
Well, so I've just closed like 6 in that one little area the last year.
So you started it because you've closed 6.
it is more like trying to establish myself as I'm the guy who sets the record.
Uh-huh. So you're doing like an 8x8? Is that kind of, or is it just every month a postcard?
So if I sell a listing in that community, I'll do a geofarm or a slide broadcast. So because I'm coaching, I have not made as much time as cold calls. Initially, it was a lot of geofarming where I'd actually hop on the phone with them. But lately, our strategy has been if we get a listing in the area, I do a slide broadcast for the nearest 200 in that community, leave them all voice messages as well as automated text that comes from my phone, but it's just, automated for me. And then we do a postcard. And then when we go under contract, we do another one. And then when we close it, we do another one. So they have if we have a listing in that community, they'll have 5 touches or more in a month. But very little do I go knock doors over there at this point.
So if I were you, my suggestion would be if you're to either commit or not commit, because he's right about the 12-month thing.
Mhm.
So we're going into a recession, right? So I would either because you've already 6 months in, so you're halfway there. I think it's worth it to not just say no and to actually think about it. But then if you commit, I would set aside the money from your budget up front. With that, you said you have a budget that's set
Yep.
aside it, commit to it, right? Instead of relying on the monthly expense.
And then maybe do it less frequently. So instead of doing it 3 times in a 5-week period, do it every 3 weeks.
Yeah, the postcards, we get a deal for doing a certain minimum. And that's where we got our pricing dialed in. But for the slide broadcasts, they're fairly cheap, but I could definitely cut back on those. But yeah, I just wanted your guys' input, honestly.
So postcards are the main thing that we do. I've done them for about 10 years, but only to SOI because I didn't have really any luck with just listed, just sold cards that were more prevalent, before the upswing in the market. But we spend, our marketing budget's very small, but that's what we spend on our postcards and we get really good conversion on it. But we crunch down our SOI list. Each of us can't have really more than 250. So you're getting the mass discount to send it out in bulk, but it's the repetition enough so that people in my neighborhood, hey, quit sending me this. Never going to happen. See you later. But you keep doing, but and it can, we change it every year. We do different postcards, but they're nothing that we buy, right? It's a very specific card. We have a graphics designer that makes it. It's very specific to Utah County and it's something that people, will keep and keep out throughout the year, instead of just something that's statistical that changes each month.
Content matters, and it matters even more in a shifting market. What is my messaging? So that's a whole different class. So
That was one of my questions for you is as far as tracking numbers and how many variations of that postcard you have going out to make sure you're not putting all your eggs in the basket to see if there's different messaging. Somebody might relate to one message, but someone might relate to the other. You wouldn't know that until you had some type of variations to that postcard. So that would the messaging on those postcards, and then also have different tracking numbers. That way you know which calls are coming from which given postcard, and that way rather than basically from here you're making a decision here because you know the calls are coming from.
Logical. So we do a different postcard every month. The postcard company we use has a graphic design team, so we give them our ideas. They draft them, they look pretty. Sure. We do obviously just listed, just sold. We'll do a neighborhood market update. We'll do trends in the area. So we've played a lot of different approaches. Sure. With SOI, it's typically either a call to action like you're saying or a home tip type.
Valuable content type stuff.
Exactly. With the farm though, it's very much information that would not get without the document basically.
Colby.
I've got something to add to this because I did it for 6 months. So earlier this year, I did it for 6 months where I was door knocking and sending out postcards. And what I discovered from sending out postcards is it's easier for them just to call somebody they already know. They probably know another agent. And so I miss out on listings because they already just call some rando, right? I think you need to have some sort of time activated call to action where they got to call you within the next month or week, or they'll just sit on it and throw that away and then lose your contact.
So something
info.
For your precision price analysis for Glenwood apartments or Glenwood condos, you need to call by Friday at 5.
Or say something crazy we'll do free staging if you call us in the next week or before the end of the month.
Yeah. Something like that.
Because they'll throw your postcard away.
Unless there's some kind of immediate need to call.
I better call this right now or I'm going to miss out on the deal.
Yeah.
I'll try to do this point.
Okay, awesome. Anything else? Any other questions? Thanks, friends. Appreciate it. Cut the fat.
Awesome. Thank you.